When Evan Callahan first heard the laughter of children drifting across his north pasture, it didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like life returning to a place that had grown too quiet since his father passed. He leaned on the fence post that morning with a mug of burnt coffee, sunlight flashing off the fresh chrome of playground swings a few hundred yards away. The sight was surreal. Slides, benches, a gazebo, and a bright green sign that read, Sage Ridge Community Park, maintained by the Ridgeview HOA. The only problem was, the park sat squarely on his land, 2 full acres of it. Evan rubbed his jaw, brow furrowed, and whispered to himself, well, that's new. The camera in your mind pans across the scene. Old cattle fencing half buried in weeds. Survey markers hammered into the soil, and a line of SUVs parked along the edge where HOA board members posed for photos. It was opening day, banners fluttering, local news snapping pictures of a project they called a triumph of community spirit. Evan didn't know yet that this community spirit was built on his title deed, a deed 3 generations deep. Evan Callahan was 53 years old, born and raised in Dry Creek County, Colorado, a place where the horizon ran farther than the gossip. His grandfather had cleared this land with mule teams in the 1940s, carving out Callahan Ranch, a sprawl of 46 acres of stubborn soil and family pride. Over the decades, the town of Dry Creek grew, then boomed, then metastasized into cul-de-sacs and coffee franchises. What had once been open pasture now bordered Ridgeview Estates. An HOA-governed maze of beige perfection, matching shutters, 3-inch grass limits, and fines for leaving your trash bin out past Tuesday. Evan had seen it coming. The bulldozers, the survey trucks, the promises. His father, Walt, used to shake his head from the porch whenever he saw new construction creeping closer. They'll come for us next, he'd warn. And they won't use guns. They'll use paperwork. Walt was half joking back then. Evan learned later that paperwork cuts deeper than any blade. After Walt's passing, Evan kept the ranch going part-time while working as a lineman for the county utility company. He wasn't a fighter, not really. His life was simple. Early mornings, long hours, nights spent fixing fences by lantern light. The HOA on the other side of the property line had been a nuisance for years, sending letters about unsightly outbuildings and unauthorized livestock odor. He'd tossed them straight into the burn barrel. Their bylaws didn't apply to him. The ranch predated Ridgeview by half a century. What he didn't realize was that the HOA president, Marla Devon, had been quietly expanding the community's boundaries on paper. Marla was the kind of woman who weaponized charm. Early 50s, former real estate agent, pearl-toothed smile that could sell ice to a glacier. She had moved from Dallas after her divorce and reinvented herself as Ridgeview's savior. Under her reign, the HOA's budget ballooned from maintenance to beautification projects. She loved 2 things, power and press coverage. So when she pitched the idea of Ridgeview Community Park, complete with a duck pond, amphitheater, and playground, the board approved it unanimously. Her only problem? Ridgeview didn't have enough open space within its actual platted boundaries. That's when she found the perfect spot. Evan's North Pasture, a flat, grassy stretch that had been in his family since before the highway existed. A recent wildfire had charred the outer fence, and Evan hadn't rebuilt yet. To Marla, it looked unused. To her developer friends, it looked cheap. To Evan, it was his father's resting place. Walt's ashes were scattered by the old cottonwood tree that still leaned stubbornly near the creek. One Tuesday morning, surveyors appeared. Evan assumed they were from the utility company checking lines. By Thursday, bulldozers rolled in. When he confronted the foreman, a sunburned guy in a hard hat looked confused. "You're Callahan? Thought this was HOA common land." "We've got permits," Evan demanded to see them. The man shrugged. "Talk to Ridgeview Board. We just build what we're told." Evan's stomach knotted. He drove straight to the county recorder's office, dusty boots tracking mud onto the tile. The clerk, a woman named Sherry who'd known him since high school, frowned at the computer. "Well, this is strange. Says here the HOA filed an easement extension last month, granting them use of parcel 12B for recreational purposes." Evan blinked. "12B? That's my north pasture," Sherry scrolled. "Filed by Ridgeview HOA, signed by a Walter Callahan?" She glanced up, hesitating. "That your dad?" Evan's throat tightened. "My dad's been dead 3 years." Right there, the world tilted. Someone had forged his father's name on a land use easement. He asked for a printout. The signature was clean, confident, nothing like Walt's shaky scrawl from his final months. The document listed Parcel 12B, 2.04 acres, transferred for community benefit. Consideration $10,000, no witnesses. Notarized at a UPS store in Denver. Evan could feel heat rising behind his eyes. It was the same trick he'd heard about on online forums. Fake paperwork, file it fast, hope the owner doesn't notice until it's too late. That night he sat in his father's old study, the air thick with dust and motor oil. He laid out every deed copy, tax receipt, survey map. The ranch had always been square-shaped, bounded by the creek to the north. Somehow, on the latest GIS map, that line had shifted south by 60 feet, exactly the footprint of the new park. He muttered aloud, "They really think I'm not paying attention." The next morning, Evan visited the construction site again. Children's laughter echoed over the roar of machinery. Workers waved as if he were a curious passerby. Marla Devon herself stood under a white tent, handing out lemonade to volunteers. She spotted him, smiled wide, and marched over. "Mr. Callahan! Isn't this exciting? We're finally bringing life to this corner of Ridgeview." Evan folded his arms. "You built it on my land." Her smile faltered, then returned, thinner. "Oh, I don't think so. Our records show it's within HOA boundaries." He held up the printed easement. "This signature isn't real." She barely glanced. "Take it up with the county, dear." "I'm just following the plan." Evan could have screamed. Instead, he turned and walked away, jaw clenched, pulse pounding. He remembered something his father always said. Never fight mad, fight smart. That night, he called his cousin Lydia, a paralegal in Denver who specialized in property law. He emailed her copies of everything. 2 hours later, she called back, voice tight. "Evan, this isn't just a mistake. This is fraud. And whoever notarized it violated State Statute 3835-101. But listen, don't confront them again yet. Let them keep building. The more they do, the deeper they dig their hole." Over the next few weeks, Evan documented everything. Drone photos of construction, dated emails from the HOA, screenshots of news articles praising the Ridgeview Park initiative. He even installed a motion camera on his fence post, capturing daily progress. Every frame showed more trespass, more concrete, more evidence. He filed Freedom of Information Act requests for county communications and building permits. The replies trickled in slowly, each one exposing new threads of collusion. One email from the county planner to Marla read, "Permit number RV24 tier approved under easement 12B. Great work pushing this through before tax reassessment." Another from Marla to the contractor said, "Let's get the ribbon cutting done before anyone objects. Optics are everything." Evan saved them all. Meanwhile, the town buzzed about the new park. Local parents loved it. Realtors bragged about adjacent green space increasing property value. Nobody cared whose dirt lay beneath the swings. Evan kept quiet, welding after work, saving his fury for the right moment. The emotional weight pressed heavier each day. He'd drive past and see kids sliding down the same slope where his father taught him to shoot a .22 as a boy. He'd see Marla posing for newspaper photos beside that old cottonwood tree, the one marking Walt's ashes. The betrayal was personal, bone deep. Yet he smiled when reporters interviewed him as local ranch neighbor. He said nothing controversial, just nodded. Because Lydia was right. Patience was ammunition. 3 months later, Marla sent him a letter by certified mail. "Dear Mr. Callahan, Ridgeview HOA appreciates your cooperation during our community expansion. As a gesture of goodwill, please accept complimentary household membership to the park and its amenities." Attached was a key card to the gated parking lot, on his own land. Evan framed that letter in his study beside his father's photo. Every time he looked at it, he whispered, "Enjoy your park while it lasts." Behind the calm exterior, the real war was already forming. Lydia's law firm connected Evan with Ben Ortega, a title fraud investigator who'd spent years exposing shady developers. Ben found something explosive, a hidden transfer filed under a shell LLC named Ridgeview Improvement Group, listing the same parcel 12B as community property pending deed confirmation. The LLC's registered agent? Marla's brother. The notary? Her college roommate. The chain of corruption circled tight. Ben explained the playbook. They create a fake easement, file it to sneak county permits, build improvements, then use the structure's existence to claim equitable ownership. Once enough public money is spent on it, the true owner looks like the bad guy for fighting. It's called constructive dedication, and it's reversible but messy. "You gotta let them finish!" Evan smirked grimly. "Then that's exactly what I'll do." For the next 6 months, he watched the park bloom like a weed. Sod rolled out, irrigation installed, gazebo painted Ridgeview beige. He even volunteered one afternoon, hammering nails beside unsuspecting HOA members. Gotta make sure it's sturdy, he joked. Nobody suspected the man in worn jeans was preparing their legal funeral. By fall, the park was complete. $380,000 in community funds spent. An official grand opening scheduled for Saturday. Marla invited local officials, photographers, and the county commissioner himself. Balloons, ribbons, speeches, the whole show. Evan ironed his cleanest shirt, polished his boots, and loaded one more thing into his truck. A thick manila envelope stamped, Notice of Property Claim and Intent to Litigate. Lydia had drafted it overnight, airtight and lethal. On opening day, Ridgeview Park shimmered under morning sun. Kids chased bubbles, parents clapped. Marla stood proudly with giant scissors poised over the red ribbon. As cameras clicked, she announced, "This park represents unity, vision, and respect for our community's legacy." The crowd cheered, until Evan stepped forward. Calm, steady, hat in hand. "Speaking of legacy," he said, voice carrying clear over the mic, "I'd like to say a few words about mine." And that's where part one ends. The moment before impact, when the thief still believes she owns the prize. The moment Evan Callahan's boots hit the gravel beside the stage, the crowd's clapping softened to a nervous hush. The man looked out of place among the polished shoes and pastel cardigans, a weathered rancher in a pressed denim shirt and a stare that could sand wood. Marla Devon's PR smile flickered. Cameras zoomed in. He tipped his hat politely, stepped to the microphone, and said evenly, "Before you cut that ribbon, you might want to make sure the ground under it belongs to you." Gasps rippled. For a second, the only sound was the banner creaking in the wind. Marla laughed, brittle as glass. "Mr. Callahan, always the jokester. This is a happy day. Let's not spoil it." Evan reached into his jacket and pulled out the manila envelope. The red stamp on the front read, "Notice of Property Claim and Intent to Litigate." He set it gently on the podium. "Happy day's over," he said. Every lens in the park swiveled. A Channel 9 reporter whispered to her cameraman to keep rolling. Marla's eyes darted to the county commissioner, who suddenly found his shoes fascinating. Evan turned toward the crowd. "This land was never Ridgeview's. The deed's mine. My father's signature on your easement was forged. Every bolt of that gazebo sits on a crime scene." Murmurs grew. A few parents scooped up their kids and backed away from the playground like it might explode. Marla tried to seize the mic, but Evan's voice carried over her. "I got proof filed with the county, and my attorney's already notified your insurer. Enjoy your lemonade." Then he walked away, slow, steady, unflinching, while camera flashes strobed like lightning behind him. That night, the story aired on the 10 o'clock news under the headline, "Rancher says HOA built park on his land." Footage showed Marla smiling frozen, ribbon half cut, scissors mid-air. Comment sections caught fire. Some called Evan a greedy land baron. Others called him a hero. By morning, the HOA's Facebook page was flooded with accusations. Someone leaked the forged easement document online. An anonymous Reddit thread titled, "How to Steal a Park Ridgeview HOA Edition" hit the front page within hours. Marla tried to spin it. She emailed residents insisting, "The matter is under review and no wrongdoing occurred." But internally, panic was spreading. Board members demanded an emergency meeting. Their insurance carrier froze reimbursement for the park's expenses. Vendors stopped accepting Ridgeview checks. Evan watched it all from his porch with quiet satisfaction. The war had just begun, and his first shot landed clean. Lydia drove in from Denver 2 days later. Her car kicked up dust as she pulled into the ranch driveway, stepping out in heels unsuited for mud. "You really dropped a bomb," she said, handing him a stack of papers. "Now we go to phase 2, file for injunction." Inside were affidavits, property surveys, notarized statements from the original title company. Lydia flipped open one map. "See this?" She traced the boundary line with a pen. They shifted the GIS overlay using a 2009 amendment that was never recorded properly. County staffer helped them. "Probably for a favor." Evan squinted. "That planner still work there?" She nodded. "Name's Holloway. Likes golf trips. Paid for by Marla's beautification fund." They filed the injunction that same afternoon. The court clerk looked almost excited, whispering, "You're the park guy?" Evan just smiled. The filing froze all HOA activity on the disputed parcel. Any further construction, maintenance, or spending would count as continued trespass. A process server delivered the notice during the next HOA board meeting, interrupting Marla mid-speech about community unity. Witnesses later described her expression as someone who bit into a lemon made of electricity. What Marla didn't know was that Evan and Lydia were documenting every reaction. They'd planted a small GoPro inside Evan's hat brim during the first confrontation. The footage, clean audio, steady shot, captured her denial and the crowd's silence. Lydia sent clips to investigative journalist Kenna Briggs from the Denver Chronicle, who specialized in HOA corruption. Kenna called within hours. If even half of this is true, Ridgeview's done. Meanwhile, Ben Ortega, the title fraud investigator, uncovered a gold mine. He traced Ridgeview Improvement Group's funding to a loan from Mountain West Bank, collateralized by the future park value. The loan application included falsified appraisals signed by Marla's brother-in-law. Ben grinned when he showed Evan the paper trail. They mortgaged your soil to build your park. That's felony wire fraud across state lines because the bank's based in Utah. Lydia nearly laughed. They built their dream park on federal charges. The HOA's attorney, a slick corporate type named Todd Renshaw, tried intimidation first. He sent Evan a letter accusing him of harassment and demanding he cease defamation. Lydia fired back a 3-page response quoting case law and attaching the forged notary record. Renshaw went silent. When a bully meets paperwork heavier than theirs, they fold fast. Over the next month, pressure built like a thunderhead. County officials opened an ethics investigation into Holloway. The HOA's board fractured. 2 members resigned, citing mental health. Marla started showing up at the park with sunglasses and no press. Parents stopped bringing kids. Grass began to die without maintenance. The laughter that once filled the air was replaced by the whine of legal notices. One afternoon, Evan found Marla waiting by his gate. Her Lexus idled behind her like a nervous pet. She called out, "Can we talk?" He hesitated, then approached slowly. She smiled thinly. "You made your point. What do you want? Money? A public apology? We can settle." Evan leaned on the gate. "I want my father's land back." She sighed, trying for reason. "Think about the optics. You'll look like the villain shutting down a children's park." He stared at her until she looked away. "Maybe," he said. "But villains don't usually have the deed." Then he turned his back and walked away. Marla didn't give up. The next morning, Evan's water pressure dropped to nothing. He followed the line north and found the valve chained shut with a new lock, Ridgeview's logo stamped on the tag. He photographed it, logged the GPS, and called Lydia. "Tampering with water access. Good," she said, voice icy. "That's retaliation. Document every drop." He installed trail cameras, caught a maintenance crew trespassing, and sent the footage straight to Kenna Briggs. Within a week, Denver Chronicle published "The HOA That Built a Park on Stolen Land." The article detonated statewide. Talk shows debated it. Law professors tweeted about constructive dedication abuse. Even the governor's press secretary shared the story with a quote about property rights. Evan's phone rang nonstop. Reporters, attorneys, angry residents demanding refunds of their HOA dues. Then came the real breaking point. Lydia's team subpoenaed Ridgeview's financials. Buried among invoices was a $48,000 consulting fee paid to Holloway, the county planner, and a $22,000 community relations bonus wired directly to Marla's personal account. Lydia laid the evidence across Evan's table, the papers forming a map of greed. "We don't just have a civil case anymore," she said. "We've got a criminal conspiracy." Evan nodded slowly, eyes on the stack. "So we build our own park, out of evidence." Together, they organized every file, photo, and email into a digital timeline. Ben produced a 90-page fraud report, complete with flowcharts showing how HOA dues funded illegal construction. Lydia prepped depositions. Kenna lined up TV crews, and Evan? He fixed his fence line, cleaned his boots, and waited. By midsummer, Ridgeview Park looked eerily abandoned. The once green grass yellowed, trash scattered across the swings. Someone spray-painted "Return What You Stole" across the gazebo. Marla's Lexus stopped showing up altogether. Behind the scenes, her lawyer was negotiating frantically with the county to avoid criminal referral. Holloway resigned for personal reasons, but Evan wasn't finished. He wanted justice recorded, not whispered. So he filed for a public hearing before the Dry Creek Town Council, citing misuse of county funds and forged records. The clerk nearly dropped her pen reading the list of evidence. "You're serious about this," she said. "Dead serious," Evan replied. When the hearing date was set, August 14th, Evan sent formal invitations to every news outlet within 200 miles, the state attorney general's office, and the HOA's insurer. He wanted an audience when the truth hit daylight. Lydia helped design the slideshow. Slide 1.
A satellite image of the park overlapping his deed boundary.
Slide 2. The fake easement. Signature comparison side by side. Slide 3. Holloway's email chain. Slide 4. Financial transfers. Slide 5. The smiling ribbon-cut photo frozen beside the words, property of Callahan Ranch. Marla tried one last counterattack. 2 nights before the hearing, Evan's mailbox exploded. Literally. A homemade firecracker rig blew the door off its hinges. No one was hurt, but Lydia called the sheriff. Deputies collected fragments of Ridgeview HOA stationery near the ditch. The next morning, FBI agents showed up asking questions about interstate banking fraud. The case had escalated to federal level. Evan didn't gloat. He just kept his promise, fight smart, not mad. On the morning of the council hearing, he stood outside the building, the same manila folder in hand. Sunlight reflecting off the brass letters that spelled Dry Creek Municipal Hall. Inside, the chamber buzzed with reporters. Marla sat at the front table beside her lawyer, face pale, lips pressed tight. When the mayor called his name, "Mr. Evan Callahan, you have the floor," the entire room fell silent. He took a breath, remembering his father's words about paperwork. Then he said quietly, "Let's start with how they stole my land using a $10 lie." The hearing chamber smelled of coffee and printer toner, the scent of bureaucracy bracing for battle. Every seat was filled. Cameras lined the walls. Outside, a storm brewed across the plains, thunder pulsing like an overture. Evan Callahan sat at the witness table, hat on his knee, eyes steady. His lawyer, Lydia Chen, whispered, "Remember, facts first, emotion second." He nodded once. Then the mayor's gavel struck wood, and history began. Evan rose slowly, the way men do when they've carried too many years of silence. "Members of the council," he began, voice low but sure. "This story starts with a fence post my father hammered in 1964. That line stood 57 years untouched, until Ridgeview HOA decided they wanted a park with a view." The projector clicked on. Slide 1 lit the wall, a drone photo of the gleaming playground overlapping his deed boundary by 32 feet. Murmurs rippled through the room. He continued, unfolding the narrative like a craftsman revealing hidden joints. "They said it was community land. They said my easement was public. But what they didn't say was that the signature on their claim belonged to a dead man." The next slide showed the forged easement beside the authentic deed, signatures magnified. Gasps broke the hush. Marla Devon, the HOA president, shifted in her seat, whispering frantically to her attorney, Todd Renshaw. He raised a hand for calm, but Evan pressed on, voice rising just enough to cut through the murmurs. "When I buried my father, they broke ground. When I protested, they threatened fines. So I did what he taught me, followed the paper. Every receipt, every transfer, every lie." Slide 3. Bank records, arrows tracing HOA dues through shell companies. They didn't just trespass. They built their dream on theft. Councilwoman Hart leaned forward, eyes narrow. "Mr. Callahan, do you have evidence these transactions were authorized by Ms. Devon personally?" Lydia stood cueing slide 4, an email chain between Marla and County Planner Holloway. "Once Evan's parcel is rezoned as community use, finalize payout." "Keep it quiet." Silence followed. Holloway himself, seated in the gallery, dropped his gaze. Then came the moment no one expected. The double doors at the back opened, and 2 federal agents entered, plain-suited, calm. They moved to the clerk's desk and handed her a folder. She passed it to the mayor, whose eyebrows rose as he read the top page. "For the record," he said slowly, "the Department of Justice has issued warrants related to wire fraud and document forgery." He looked toward Marla. "Ma'am, you may wish to consult counsel." The room erupted, reporters shouting, cameras flashing, council gavel pounding futilely. Evan didn't smile. He simply waited until order returned, then advanced to the next slide. Footage from his trail cameras, Ridgeview contractors cutting his water valve, the HOA logo shining under flashlight. "They tried to starve my cattle. They thought I'd quit. But every time they crossed the line, they wrote another paragraph of their own indictment." When he finished, the lights came up. Rain hammered the windows. The mayor cleared his throat. "The council finds sufficient evidence of criminal wrongdoing and refers all matters to the state attorney general. Mr. Callahan's property rights are affirmed in full." The gavel fell like a thunderclap. Applause erupted, not polite clapping, but the roar of a town shaking off its fear. Outside, reporters swarmed. One thrust a mic forward. "Mr. Callahan, what does justice feel like?" He looked past them to the dark horizon where the park's bright plastic slides glistened with rain. "Heavy," he said. But honest, the arrests came within hours. Marla was taken from her home in handcuffs, face pale under porch lights. Holloway surrendered quietly. Renshaw issued a statement blaming administrative errors, which only fueled the outrage. News anchors across Colorado led with the headline, "Park Built on Stolen Land." Talk shows debated whether HOAs wield too much unchecked power. Evan watched from his kitchen, the television glow painting his lined face gold and blue. For the first time in months, he exhaled fully. Weeks passed, then months. The park was fenced off, evidence tags fluttering in the wind. Children now played in the schoolyard instead, their laughter echoing across the fields like something newly freed. Evan spent his mornings repairing old fences, his afternoons meeting with reporters, lawyers, and eventually legislators. Lydia called one evening. "They want you in Denver," she said. "State House hearing on HOA reform. You're the headline witness." He hesitated. "I'm no politician," she laughed softly. "You're proof." At the Capitol, he stood before a semicircle of lawmakers, retelling the saga in calm, factual cadence. "I'm not against community," he said. "But community built on fraud isn't community. It's empire. An empire's fall." The bill that followed, the Property Integrity and HOA Transparency Act, passed unanimously. For the first time, HOAs statewide faced mandatory audits and deed verification before major projects. The governor signed it beside Evan's framed map of Callahan Ranch. Cameras flashed again, but this time the applause felt earned. Life returned to something like peace. The ranch's fences gleamed with new paint. Lydia visited often, bringing boxes of court documents now stamped closed. On a mild September evening, Evan built a small fire by the creek. The charred posts of the old park still dotted the horizon, grass growing between them. He watched the flames dance and murmured, "Guess you were right, Dad. Paper beats power." Months later, national networks picked up the story for a documentary series on modern land fraud. They titled his episode, "The Park That Wasn't Theirs." Views climbed into the millions. Donations poured into a new nonprofit Lydia and Evan co-founded, the Callahan Trust, providing legal aid to homeowners fighting abusive HOAs. Within a year, it saved 6 families from foreclosure and exposed 3 more forged deed schemes. The final loose end came when the county auctioned the reclaimed park equipment. Evan bought the weather-worn gazebo for $1, the same sum Ridgeview had once used to fake his easement. He rebuilt it beside his barn, stained it dark cedar, and nailed a brass plaque to the rail. Built on truth, not permission. Every Sunday, neighbors gathered there for coffee and quiet conversation. Kids climbed the old slide, dogs napped under the benches, and no one asked for dues. The land was his again, alive, humble, ungoverned by greed. On the anniversary of the hearing, a light drizzle swept across Dry Creek. Evan stood at the property line where the first confrontation had happened, a new fence post shining under rain. The voiceover would fade here, gentle but resolute. They thought they could own what they never earned. But land remembers its name and truth remembers its home. The park's gone, the lies are gone, and the fence still stands, same as it did in '64. If you're fighting an HOA monster, remember, paperwork is your sword, patience your shield, and justice. It just takes time.